opportunities and what our kids have, what our kids can expect post high school. We are so excited about starting off this speaker series, which is a partnership with Wellspring, with the Gloucester High School Counseling Department and Gloucester Education Foundation. We also have a great group of people that have volunteered to help put together our speaker series. Lori Smith, Ted Costa, Anna O'Connor, Kathy Clancy, and Sarah Oakes. Thank you all so much. Sarah was also instrumental in getting tonight's workshop organized. So thank you all for your time helping to put things together. So without further ado, I would like to introduce our workshop. I just also want to let you know that just a quick reminder to mute as you come in, because I know sometimes it's unmuted when you join. And I wanted to let you know also that I believe Laura Carlson from the school counseling office is on our call tonight, which is so great. Laura will be here to help answer questions as well as Sheila, our speaker. So tonight's workshop is college admissions during COVID, a very hot button issue and something I know we're all excited to learn more about. Sheila Akbar is our speaker tonight. And Sheila is joining us actually from California. She is the president and COO of Signet Education. She's an admissions and test prep expert. Sheila joined the Signet team in the summer of 2010, bringing with her a wealth of experience in teaching, SAT, ACT, GRE, literature, and composition in both one-on-one and classroom settings. She loves teaching and learning and finds nothing more rewarding than working closely with students to overcome the challenges that they face. Sheila graduated from Harvard in 2002, and she spent 2 years working in financial services before going into her academic career, which culminated in 2 doctorates. She brings significant business and academic experience to bear on her role at Signet Education, which includes managing the administrative team, speaking to incoming clients and matching them with the right tutors and services, and providing educational thought leadership for the company. Sheila has a bachelor's degree and a master's degree from Harvard and 2 doctoral degrees from Indiana University. So Sheila, thank you so much for being here with us tonight. We're so excited to welcome you to the community here in Gloucester. And Sheila's going to share her screen with us and go into her presentation momentarily. And I just wanted to let all of you know that we would love for this to be interactive. If you have questions as Sheila's going through her presentation, you can go ahead and share them in the chat, and we'll make sure we try to get to everyone's questions towards the end. You're also welcome to, when we have a little bit of time at the end of the presentation, to just ask your question directly. Just do the little raise hand, thingy on the bottom of your screen. What do you call that? A thingy? I don't know. And we will be excited to have a conversation and get all your questions answered. So without further ado, Sheila, take it away.
Thank you. Thank you for that lovely introduction. I always get embarrassed when people read my bio, but I do have a lot of experience. I've been running Signet for a while. I've run our admissions team and I run our test prep team, so I can really answer pretty much any question you have about that stuff. But of course, you all have a really great resource in Laura. So I may, Laura, put you on the spot to help me answer some questions as we go along as well. So I'm going to share my screen now, and I will say, even though I'll be sharing my screen, I love seeing faces. So right now, all I can see is Aria's, and it is a lovely face. But if anyone else cares to turn their camera on, that just helps me have a little more energy as I go through this presentation. So feel free to turn your camera on. It'd be nice to see your little thumbnail face. So we originally conceived of this presentation as a 2-parter. One, we were going to focus on building the college list, and the second was going to be on all the other pieces of the application and kind of how to get through it. TBD on the schedule for the second presentation, but tonight we're going to focus on the college list. And I know that this is kind of a hot button topic because you feel like you can't visit any schools. And it feels really hard to decide where to apply without actually setting foot on a campus. So we're going to talk through all the ways that you can research schools besides going to them. And here's a little taste of our agenda for the day. I'm going to walk you through the process of how to find a school and add it to your list of schools that your student wants to apply to. So these steps may not blow your mind, but hopefully as we go through the slides, I'll be able to share some resources and some tips and some conversation starters to help you kind of go through this process. And after the webinar is done, I've sent a link to a free course that we have on our website that will take you through all of these steps and has all of the resources that I'm going to show you tonight as well. So first, as we are thinking about how to build a college list, it might be helpful to think about when to start this process before the how. Typically, I like to see juniors starting to think about this sometime in the winter, maybe, so that when spring break comes around, they could go visit some schools. If that timeline has passed for you, that's not a problem. There is plenty of time over the summer to do all of this research, fit in a few visits if they're possible, and still come out with a great college list before you actually need to start writing essays. So at Signet, what we always say is it starts with your student. Really, everybody has their own ideas about what colleges are good and where your student should go and things like that. But you really want to try to shift some of the responsibility for researching colleges and thinking about where they want to be for the next 4 years onto your student. So we encourage a lot of reflection. And I know a lot of parents and students roll their eyes at that word. It's hard to do, but it's really the best way to go about this, because what you want to focus on is fit, and fit in a number of different ways. We talked about academic fit, whether a student can handle the academic rigor of a particular university or college. We talk about social fit. Are they going to be at school with the kinds of people they want to be around, the kinds of people they can make friends with? Are they going to have the opportunities that they want there in terms of sports or clubs or things like that? We can also talk about geographic or cultural fit. Sometimes there may be a religious fit involved if your student is interested or not interested in going to a religious institution. So there are a lot of different ways you can think about this, but it all starts with your student. We have to understand your student's preferences and needs before we can really start thinking about what colleges should we even be looking at. And what we've used is a worksheet that we call the Personal College Inventory. I'll show you that in just a second here. And it basically walks through different ways that you can think about preferences. Gives you a little explanation of, you know, what it might be like to go to school where it's always sunny or when it's always cold, and how that might impact your students' experience at college. And I do recommend that you try to do this with your students. Sometimes it can be kind of fun, and I put fun in quotes because I know this is, well, it's very rare to find a fun moment in this process. But for maybe a parent to do the worksheet on their own, guessing at what the students' preferences are, and then the student to do it on their own, and then you guys compare notes. You will need to set aside some time for this, not really something that can just be done on the fly while you're in the car. But I think making an event out of this can be a really great way to kick off sort of open communication between you and your student about what you both see in their future for college. And your vision may be different from your students, and that's fine. It's important, I think, to discuss those differences and those preferences. You may have things that are just non-negotiable. You know, my student is not going more than a 5-hour drive from home. That's fine. Just make that really clear with your students so they don't get their heart set on a school that's outside of that radius up front, right? So think through what your limits are and where it's okay for the two of you to disagree a little bit and see if you can have a productive discussion around that disagreement. But you know, let them know what's non-negotiable for you up front. I think that will help a lot. So now I'm going to continue sharing, and I flipped over to the Personal College Inventory. And of course, this is linked in the link that you will get after the presentation. But you can see we talk first in broad strokes. What area of the country do we want to be in? And this may have implications for how easy it is to get back and forth from that school. It's one of the things we saw with COVID. A lot of people decided to target schools a lot closer to home because it was so traumatic last year when all these college kids had to be sent home in the middle of the semester. So now everyone's kind of staying close to home. It may have to do with what other opportunities are in those areas, right? If your student is really interested in agriculture, for example, they might want to look at a school in the Plains or in the West because there are agricultural opportunities for them there outside of the campus. So there are a lot of different ways to think about what areas of the country you might be comfortable with looking at, and what opportunities might come along with those places. I also encourage students to think about climate. A lot of people will tell me, oh, we got 4 seasons in the Northeast, we're good with anything. But I will tell you, students who come out to the West Coast, where I am in Los Angeles, are like, what happened to those seasons? The sun is setting at 4 o'clock, but it's 75 degrees and there are Christmas decorations on all the streetlights. I'm so confused. It can be very disorienting to switch climates, or to be in a climate where there's not that much change, or even radical change. A lot of students also have seasonal affective disorders, or let's say trends. People get really, sad in the winter, or they're really happy when it's sunny. They hate the rain. Some of these things we can dismiss as like, okay, superficial wants. But if you know your student is really affected by the weather, maybe they have a medical condition where they're affected by the weather, or there are things that they really love doing that they can only do in certain climates, right? If they really love skiing, don't think about going to Arizona, right? It's important to think about these things, because the more successful they will be in college. And we're not just talking about giving them opportunities to party, but really the activities that are meaningful to them, important access to those things. So think about how climate might affect that. And then we start thinking about, do they want to be in a city, outside of a city, in a college town, or someplace completely rural? Sometimes students have a hard time understanding what this looks like. This is where a college tour can be helpful, but there are plenty of ways to different city sizes feel like, even within driving distance of Gloucester, right? There are rural campuses like Amherst. There is obviously all of the Boston campuses. BU is a great one. Northeastern would be an urban campus. The suburban campuses would be the ones in Cambridge, or Somerville. So Tufts University, that's a great suburban campus. And then you've got examples of college towns. So you don't actually need to set foot on campus to understand what the setting looks like, and there are lots of different ways to get a feel for this. But this is also really important. Based on the size of the setting or the kind of setting, your students are going to have different off-campus opportunities and access and adventures, let's say. So think about where they're going to be comfortable and what they're really excited about. And that can help you narrow down your colleges based on their setting as well. And now we start getting into the specifics of the school. How big is it? Now, I actually don't know the size of the high school, but most high schools are somewhere between 500 and 3,000 kids. And it can be very hard to imagine what it's like to go to school with 20,000 other students. Some of those really big schools are University of Michigan or University of Texas or even UCLA. And there is a difference between going to a school with a small student body, where you may have smaller, more discussion-based classes, more access to professors, you kind of know everybody in your school. And that's very different from being at a place like UCLA, where you may not ever have a class with the same student again, and your advisor probably won't know your name. You really have to advocate for yourself and be very self-aware and proactive to manage your own education. Whereas at a smaller school, you wouldn't have to do that. So that's another thing that can be really important to think about for your student in terms of where they're going to be successful. And of course, you don't always want to play it safe. You want to push them outside of their comfort zone a little bit, but definitely get a sense for this. And then we talk about type of school. I'm not going to go through every one of these. You'll see this worksheet and have some examples here. But different types of schools offer different types of majors and a different sort of educational philosophy. So this is an important one to research and click off the right preferences for you. And then we've got some, more or less vague descriptors of the campus atmosphere. And of course, these are all overly simplified. Any campus is going to have a mix of a lot of different types of people and a lot of different types of environments. But if we want to, I guess, stereotype a college, this would be a place where you could do that. And, how rigorous should the academics be? Is this, the main thrust for your student? They want the most rigorous academic experience. or they just want to graduate college with a good set of skills and the ability to get a good job that might not be, you know, a top school. And then what kind of activities do they want to be involved in? You don't have to get too specific, but general categories are really, really helpful, and you'll see why as we move to the next step. And then whether financial aid is really important or not, because that can also be a limiting factor in the kinds of schools you look at. And then you'll go through and you'll kind of decide what's a make or break preference, and that will give you a really great set of preferences to then take to a college search engine to be able to put in what your preferences are and get a list of colleges to start looking at. So this is a really great worksheet. It's pretty self-explanatory, but of course, if you guys have questions, we can go over them towards the end. Let me get back into my presentation. And again, I think making an event of this is a really good way to approach this, and a good way to kick off the entire process with some transparency, because your student really needs to be able to think about college as a place they're going to live for the next 4 years, not just another school that they're going to go to. So there's a lot more than just what's your major and who are the professors, or what's the selectivity of a college that goes into thinking about this. So we start with the student, and then we kind of play matching game with the colleges. So I'll move on. Once you've got those preferences understood, and they may, develop over time as you do more research on schools. If you eventually go see some schools, your student may have thought they would have liked something, and then when they see it, when they experience it, they don't really like it that much anymore. So those preferences may change. But as you kind of solidify some core preferences, you want to also get familiar with the resources that are available to you to then take those preferences and do research into schools. So Naviance, I know, is a program that is available through your school. That is really one of the best places to research schools, because your counselor can also see what you've put on your shortlist and can give you input. You can also see what they call a scattergram. So you can see other students from your school and how they fared, and therefore where do you stand in terms of competitiveness for certain types of schools, and whether you're a fit there or not. So I definitely recommend everyone going to Naviance. There are a number of other free websites that are also chock full of information. Big Future is one that is run by the College Board. That's the company that makes the SAT. So if you have a College Board account, you can get into Big Future, and it is totally free. And their search engine is really, really straightforward. You put in, your test scores, you put in your grades, you put in all those preferences that you listed out, and it will spit back a list of schools. And then you can click on each school to get more information about each one, in terms of their admission statistics and some things about their population. So that's a really good one. I tend to recommend starting there because it is such a comprehensive search engine. Niche.com has a similar functionality, and Niche also incorporates reviews from actual students. You want to take these with a grain of salt, just like with Yelp. The people who tend to leave reviews are either really upset or really happy. And so you've got to kind of find a balance between the two. Same thing happens on Niche. One that I really like that not a lot of people use is called College Results. One of the things I like about it is it just gives you a ton of data. It may be a little overwhelming to start there, but eventually look up the colleges that you think you might want to apply to there, because you'll get all kinds of data about graduation rates, diversity, how many students get financial aid, what's the average award for financial aid. One of the things I love about it is if you put in a particular school, you can also see colleges that are similar to it. So for example, if you really love BU, you can put in Boston University and see similar schools. I'll give you a list of 20 other schools that are similar to BU. That you could also explore to see if you might like those as well. Another guide that people really like is the FISC guide. This is actually a printed book. I don't think they have maybe it's on Kindle, but they don't really have an online website for this, but it's a great book. It's probably in your library. It's got all kinds of information about different schools and different ways of looking up what kind of schools might be a fit for you. So I recommend, even before you do the college inventory, your preferences, start to look at some of these websites and these tools so you understand what to do with the information that you're going to get from completing that worksheet. And this is a stage where you don't really need to worry about finding the right colleges. You're still really just exploring. and seeing what's out there, getting familiar with the tools. You might start to really lock in on a couple of key preferences that start to matter a little bit more than you thought they would, and that's great. But keep track of how those preferences change, and start to get familiar with these tools before you get all hyped up about one school or another just yet. And then once you're familiar with your tools, you know your preferences, what you're going to do is get all of this information together along with your GPA and your SAT, ACT scores, if you have them. We can talk about test optional if you guys have questions about that, because a lot of schools are saying we don't need SAT or ACT scores. Collect your information and then use your tools to determine what kind of colleges you should be looking at. So typically we like students to build a college list of about 8 to 12 schools. We'll talk about this in a little bit more detail, but they should differ in terms of selectivity. So you'll have a couple that are really hard to get into. You'll have a couple where your student is right on the money and they would be a great fit there. And then you've got a couple of safeties as well, where you can be pretty sure they're going to get in. And so you really want to understand kind of where your students stack up, though you want to keep in mind that it's not all about the GPA and it's not all about the test scores. Those are two big factors, but it's not everything that is going to make the decision here. So I want to show you another worksheet that you will be sent. This is part of a larger PDF, but these charts I find extremely helpful for understanding kind of what are we targeting here. So you take your students' unweighted GPA and then their average section score on the SAT or their composite score on the ACT to find out kind of where their sweet spot is, right? So let's say I've got a 26 on the ACT and I'm at a 3.1. I fall right over here in the very competitive plus range. And on this PDF, you'll get a list of these colleges by the selectivity. So if I said very competitive plus, that's a 4 according to this list. So I want to be looking at my 4s, right? You scroll down here. Now these would be what I call your target colleges, right? So if you are, we'll go back to my pretty picture. If you're right here, you want to call this your target range. Anything outside of that would be your safety range. And anything above that would be a reach or even super reach range, right? Now, this is a very kind of quick and dirty way to categorize it. You can definitely get more nuanced and more informed about categorizing your schools, but this can help you get kind of a rough idea of what are the kinds of schools I really want to target, where should I get the most excited, okay? So you can use a tool like this. Naviance doesn't have these charts, but the scattergrams will also really help you understand that, and you can do research on Naviance. So I'll go back here now. All right, so now, as you can see, we're kind of starting with a broad funnel and we're starting to narrow down, right? Now we have an understanding of what are our target schools, and these broad strokes are gonna get more refined as we go forward, right? And then what you wanna do is use your preferences to start searching for specific schools, right? So let's say I saw those schools that I thought that I was in a target range for. They're all over the country. They're all different sizes. They have different academic environments. So now you take your preferences and say, okay, what's in a city? What's got high academic rigor, and what's got a really great sports culture? And you're going to start to narrow down your school list, right? And I really recommend keeping track of everything in a good spreadsheet. So in the link that you'll get, there is an Excel spreadsheet that you can download. I recommend doing it on Google Docs. And what I'm going to do is show you an actual spreadsheet from one of my students. I've anonymized it. But the template you'll get will have, these categories that are here in row 2. And what you want to do is start by putting in your preferences a little bit, right? What are your stats? This particular student had a 31 ACT, wants around a 6K student body. It's kind of specific, it might be a range. The kind of settings they like. This is the major, and you can see as you look through the majors, it's really, really focused on applied math and economics. And they really want to do, oh, that should be there. They really want to do a study abroad program if we look over here in the opportunities section, right? And this template is actually quite large, and I'll tell you why it gets so big as we go through this. But to start with, you really just want to put in the schools that you're interested in, link their websites, and then start filling in these stats so you can see how you stack up, right? Most of these schools have an admitted student's profile on their admissions site. And so you can see of the freshmen who were admitted last year, what's the average GPA they had in high school, or what was the average ACT or SAT score they had. You can also use tools like Big Future or College Results or even Naviance to get this information. And I really recommend reorganizing for yourself here because that is all in one place, right? And you could set up some filters. So like if I wanted to arrange this by ACT scores, lowest to highest, I know my more competitive schools are down at the bottom, right? It just makes it easier for me to see an overview of what we're considering here. And then you don't have to go and find, your random scrap of paper or that email you sent yourself or a note you left on your phone. All of your research is really in one place, right? So I like to have an enthusiasm category. You could come up with a scale of, 1 to 10 or 1 to 5, how excited your student is about these schools that they're seeing, right? There may be some like, okay, we should probably consider it, but I'm not that excited about it. Put it on the list, mark it with a 2 or something like that, just so you keep track of what you like and what you don't like. Eventually, you'll start filling in the category, whether this is a reach, target, or safety school for you, based on that chart or Naviance, like I was saying. And then, this stuff here is really data from the school, right? So you're going to fill in this from whatever resource you're getting that information from. From this column on, this is where I want the student to start talking about what are they interested in, right? So, this student has linked the list of majors and minors at Fordham here, and these are the majors and minors that they've picked out that they would be interested in. Now, I want to make a caveat here. It's not necessary for your student to have an exact major in mind when they're doing this research. But if you have an idea of the kind of things you might want to study, that's a good thing to look into because you don't want to apply to school that doesn't have the thing you want to study, right? So take a look at that, but you don't have to get married to any particular major yet. If there is something that you think you want to study, it can be helpful to look at actual course descriptions and write down the names of the courses that you find interesting. This will come in handy when you're actually writing your applications. You won't have to go and do this research to say, what resources are you going to take advantage of this school, or why do you want to study economics at Fordham? You could look at your spreadsheet and say, oh yeah, there was this class and I really like this thing about the major. There were these clubs, right? So it's all right here for you to revisit when you're writing your essays because they will ask for specifics there. So if there are particular professors that you find really interesting, you could link them here. I've got clubs, opportunities. This student wants to do study abroad, so they would leave information about study abroad here. Northeastern is one of the schools that they're looking at, so they're really interested in the co-op program there. They actually did some research on the academic philosophy too, to see what the school says their philosophy is, and see how that resonates with the student, right? And over time, as you narrow your list, you'll start looking at what are the essay questions for that college and what's the word count for it. And you can keep track of all of it here. And I'll tell you, it is so much easier to have it all in a spreadsheet than to keep going back into your Common App or the application platform for the school to figure these things out, and you'll lose track of it, right? So you'll get a sample of that spreadsheet because it's a lifesaver, I'm telling you. All right. And then I want you to keep in mind a couple of things because of COVID. It does make choosing schools a little bit more complicated than normal. It's always complicated, but there are a couple of new factors to think about, right? So many schools are going test optional for this year's juniors who will be applying next fall, right? Last year when COVID first hit, about 97% of all colleges and universities in the United States went test optional or test blind, which means they didn't require you to submit an SAT or an ACT. I want to be clear that there were already about 1,300 colleges and universities in the United States that were already test optional even before COVID, because a lot of colleges are moving away from the SAT and the ACT. It does show a certain amount of bias, and it really only measures how well a student does on a test not their academic potential or anything like that. And so colleges are finding that information not as useful for predicting who would be a good student at their school. And so they're moving away from that. COVID definitely accelerated that trend. It's important to know that there are some schools that even if you do have an SAT or an ACT score, they don't want to see it. Those are called test blind schools. So the University of California system actually just went test blind, which is a big thing in California. But you know, Massachusetts, I don't know how many of you are thinking about going out to California. There are plenty of really great test optional and test blind universities in the Northeast. They tend to be smaller liberal arts colleges. So sometimes it can be helpful to think about what colleges are we thinking about before you even embark on a test preparation process, whether you're working with a tutor or studying on your own. You may not need a test, right? But what I typically tell our clients, what I advise our clients is that if you can score at or above the average for the colleges that you're looking at, your tests are probably going to help you in that process. So you may want to go, you know, consider prepping and taking one of these tests. This is a really kind of thorny issue. So this is definitely one where I recommend you talk with your guidance counselor, talk with a testing expert. I'm happy to answer your questions about this as well. But that can affect what your school list looks like. If all the schools on your list are test optional, but one of them is requiring the SAT, you want to ask yourself, is it worth taking the SAT just for that one school? Or is that a school that you could maybe take off your list, right? Or if you know you've got really great SAT scores, that will certainly change where you might want to apply. It might change your standing. You know, you might move it into the target category as opposed to being a reach school. So that's one thing to consider. Another big piece of this is that college visits are limited. They were all canceled last year. They are starting to creep back. A lot of colleges are allowing for them, obviously with social distancing and COVID safety protocols in place. If you have the opportunity to travel, obviously traveling is kind of tricky right now, but if you have the opportunity maybe to do a road trip to see some colleges, that can be very helpful in not only, you know, researching a specific college that you're visiting, but also helping your student kind of get into the mindset and understand what different campuses look like, or different, you know, some of the preferences that they thought they had, what that actually looks like in reality. And that can be very, very helpful for kind of grounding this whole process, not so theoretical anymore. But even for those schools where college visits are limited, every one of them has a number of virtual tours available. So you can look on their admissions website and get a link to basically a YouTube video that will take you through campus. Some of them are sort of 3D interactive, and some of them are unofficial. So you can always search YouTube for a college tour. You will find, you know, some mom recording her son's college tour from like 3 years ago, and there'll be a lot of like embarrassing family banter in the video, but you'll get a picture of what that college looks like. And it won't just be what the college wants you to know, right? That's one thing you want to keep in mind, is that colleges want to attract students. Whether or not you have a good chance of getting in there, they want to increase their applications. So if you took the PSAT, for example, you've probably got tons of college mail saying, hey, you know, we want you to consider our school, or we want you to apply. Lots of shiny brochures and things like that, probably lots of emails. And those videos of that the colleges have put together for their virtual tours are, you know, very well engineered by marketing teams to make their campuses look amazing, right? So they're only highlighting the most amazing things that they think are going to attract you. So you do kind of want to get behind the curtain a little bit and try to understand what the school is actually like. Sorry, somebody is unmuted and has a lot of background noise. Thank you, perfect. Whether that means going to the campus and like driving around it, even if you're not taking an official tour, or you know, looking up one of these like rogue videos on YouTube to see what it's actually like. I think it's really important to try to get a sense for the physical environment of the college. And if those are sort of still lacking, I understand that they can be, it can be really helpful for students to talk to current students. And an admissions office will usually be able to introduce your prospective student to a current student, or maybe you have alumni from your school who have gone off to those colleges, you can talk to them, or maybe you have, you know, family friends or cousins or something like that. You can really talk to them about what they like and what they don't like about that campus and get a sense for, you know, whether that would be a fit for you, even if you can't visit. Another piece of the COVID impact is, I mentioned before, a lot of people just want to stay closer to home. They want to stay closer to their family in case we have another global pandemic or some other, God forbid, some other kind of emergency. So that means competition has become really, really tight for, you know, students who want to stay in the Northeast, for example. So if you are open to going a little further from home, that may actually increase your chances of admission, because colleges do want to maintain a really diverse group of students, not just in terms of, you know, ethnic or racial diversity or socioeconomic diversity, but also geographic diversity. They don't want everyone at their school to be from the same town. They want them to be from all over the place, because that really enriches the student body. So that's another thing to think about as you are putting your college list together. You know, adding in a few schools that are a little bit further from home may actually give you more options. And again, this is the thing that, you know, you have to discuss as a family and think about what are your limitations, and what's a, you know, a deal breaker for you. And everyone will have different preferences, and I just encourage you to talk about them openly. I'm sure we'll have more questions about COVID. But at this point, we should have a college list that really fits their wants, needs, and skills. And as we'll talk about on this slide, the colleges should have different levels of selectivity, but all of them should be places that your student would be really happy to go to. They would be able to go there and study the thing they want to study, be around the kind of people they want to be around, join the clubs that they're really interested in exploring, you know, whether or not it has a 50% acceptance rate or a 5% acceptance rate, right? This should be a school where they can achieve the goals that they have for college, right? But we also want to be really realistic. You can't apply to every single college. Every year we hear about students who applied to 50 colleges or 25 colleges, and that's just insane. That's an insane amount of work. There is just no way to send in high quality applications to, I think, more than 15 schools. And those who do it are trying to, I think, game a system by applying very, very broadly to get as many acceptances as possible, because they think that's going to help them have more choices. But what we actually recommend is to be very targeted, right? We want to be realistic. So again, we want to have 2 or 3 safety schools, 3 or 4 target schools, and then 2 or 3 reach schools. That might be a little harder to get into. But that way you're kind of diversifying your portfolio of schools, right? And the more research you can do to understand how you specifically are a fit for that school, the better your chances of convincing a school that you are a good fit for them and therefore getting in are, right? Because that's really what schools are trying to do. They want to see, are you going to be an asset to our student body, and can you handle the academic rigor? And depending on the school, it may be in a different order. So the job that your application has to do is convince that school that you are a good fit for them and that you could thrive there, right? So that's why understanding your preferences and understanding the schools really well is so key to making this whole process successful, right? And again, it's a family decision. Your student's going to have their own clear preferences. They may be based on nothing besides they saw something on TikTok and now they're in love with the school. And you guys can debate whether that has merit or not. But I think it's really important to make sure everyone feels heard, and to, you know, come out of this process with a clear sense of being on the same page of what are the goals for college, and what kinds of institutions will actually serve you in achieving those goals. All right. Now, this is a place where it can get really hard, because I have a lot of students who get their list to about 20 to 25, and then they're like, they're all kind of the same now. I don't know how to cut things off my list, or I don't know how to decide. So this is where a campus visit or a virtual tour can really help. And trust your gut. If you don't like something, take note of it, because that can really help you either narrow that college out of the mix or other colleges. If you really do like something, note that down too, because then you're going to know, oh yeah, this other school has the same thing. I know I like a co-op program already. So, you know, save yourself some research. Consider what it's going to be like getting to and from the school. Is this a place that your family's going to drive you to? You're going to have to fly to? You're going to take a boat? Like what does it look like? What does that cost? how often would you actually be able to come home? I have a number of students who get all excited about coming out to California, their families in the Northeast, and then they have their first long weekend at school and they can't go home because flying 6 hours doesn't really make sense to come home for like 2 days, basically. It's expensive and it takes up a lot of your time, it just feels not worth it. So a lot of students don't end up going home until Thanksgiving or even Christmas, and that can be really hard for your first semester away. So think about that realistically and how that's going to affect you. I always ask students to imagine their life on campus. What are they going to do besides take these classes? What clubs are they going to join? What classes are they going to take? Where are they going to hang out? Where are they going to study? What's the restaurant that they're going to want to go to with their friends to meet up with on the weekends? And can they see themselves there? And does that feel fulfilling? That can help you think about this college is probably not a fit for me. And then there's always more research to be done. So I do have a handout that we call top questions to answer when researching a school. And it's like 20 some questions. Let's see. No, 12 questions. It just seems longer. And it really gets into the nitty gritty of what are the students doing on that campus? Who are the professors? Why are the things that they tout about their learning philosophy, why are those things important to you? And so it's a lot of work, but I will tell you, you will really know a school once you are able to answer all of these questions. And of course, keep your information, your research organized on your spreadsheet and mark out things that you like and you dislike. I always also recommend keeping track of the schools that you've taken off of your list because they may resurface in some way, right? As you're answering these questions for yourself and for each of the schools, you may realize you had it wrong the first time you did this. And this may change your mind about some things. So keep all of this information somewhere and go the extra mile and really try to understand what your life is going to be like on this campus. All right, going back to the presentation. And then what you're going to want to do is hopefully you've got no more than 15 schools, hopefully less than that. Then you want to actually create, I usually recommend a Google folder to keep the essays and all the writing that you're going to do for each of those schools, right? Your research spreadsheet is going to transform into kind of a project management document that will have due dates, whether you're going to apply early action or early decision, and I'm happy to answer questions about that. Specific extra application requirements, maybe a school code, things like that, so that you have it all in one place. You don't need to go searching for it when you're trying to fill out these applications. And I recommend, once you've kind of got this whole thing filled out, you got a pretty good sense of your list, definitely get a trusted second opinion. Your school counselor is a great resource for this. Maybe a friend who's recently gone through the process, or someone else who really understands who you are and what these colleges have to offer you. Another thing that can help you narrow is as you are finalizing the spreadsheet and starting to pull in what are the essay questions for all of the schools, you may see that a school, for example, Stanford, has like 12 extra questions that you have to answer, or Columbia, I think, has 8, Brown has like 7. And then you may not want to do that, or you may not have time to do that, right? And that can really help you think about, all right, what's going to be strategic for me? As you get to thinking about your essays, there'll be one main essay, and there'll be, at many schools, they have what they call supplemental essays, which are shorter essays that are much more specific to each school. So you do have to write a new version for each school, but sometimes the questions are similar. Usually it's some version of why do you want to go to this school, right? And this is why I've asked you to keep this spreadsheet all along, because your spreadsheet has the answer of why you want to go to that school, right? It's the right size for you. There's this professor, these clubs, this study abroad opportunity, and you can put that all into that essay. But what you'll see is as you look at your spreadsheet as well, you'll start to see schools have the same question. And similar schools that have similar opportunities, theoretically, this is why you like those schools, you can answer those questions in similar ways. So you'll start to see how you can actually condense your writing process by saying these schools are similar and they have similar questions, so I can use almost the same essay. Of course, you want to be careful and change the names and make it personalized to each school. but you can kind of almost use the essay that you've written for one school as a template for another school. And that will really ease your workload when it comes to writing all of these essays too. So that's how I recommend you go about this process. And I recognize there were a lot of little details I could have got into that I didn't. So I want to open it up for questions now. This is my email address. I answer all of my own emails. I'm kind of obsessive about it. This is the office line. It does go to my cell phone. You can text it. So if you have questions, feel free to ask away. I'm not going to rope you into, buying a service. I just love talking to people about this stuff. So please don't hesitate to reach out with questions. And I'm going to stop sharing now. And I think we'll just go to questions. Nobody put any questions in the chat. I was that good at predicting what you guys had concerns about.
I know, it was just so comprehensive. That was just beautiful.
Thank you.
But yeah, please feel free to put your hand up, anybody, or type something in the chat. And I did, Sheila, just put the link that you had sent me with the college list
Great.
in there. So I encourage everyone to grab that link because this has a lot of the materials that Sheila was sharing with us tonight and information as well. And the spreadsheet is in there probably too, right?
Yeah, yep. There's a template for the spreadsheet in there.
Okay. Any questions out there? Oh, here we go. We've got a couple coming in.
Great. All right. Actually, Laura, do you want to take the question about unweighted GPA? I'm happy to, but.
I can talk about it briefly because at our high school, in our computer system, it does not GPA. But it's we have had students in certain years for scholarships in certain colleges, but not a ton. And a school district administrator would actually look into the unweighted GPA. So it is possible, but not as seamless as our computer program would like it to be. So you can expand on that with respect to the colleges.
Yeah.
Ask it certain times, but not a ton in the 20 years I've been at the high school.
Okay. So yeah, it's a great question. Just so everyone knows the question, why use unweighted GPA? What about students taking all honors in it? And I could go into a lot of detail about why, but I'm gonna try to keep it short. So every college is going to recalculate your GPA. They will not use the unweighted GPA that's on your transcript. They have computer software for this, but they will enter your courses. They will decide on the rigor of the courses based on other information that the school will provide to them. And then they will kind of look at your grades separate from the rigor of your courses, right? And so that's why they want an unweighted GPA. So there are plenty of free unweighted GPA calculators on the internet that you can use. Or apparently you can ask someone in your district to get you the actual unweighted number. But it's important to think about that because the weighting can really inflate your sense of how academically competitive you are, right? It's great when students take honors and AP courses, and that will be accounted for in the admissions officer's evaluation of the student, right? But they want to see that information just teased out from the grades. One of the other things to think about here is that there are some schools that just don't offer honors or AP classes. And that may be because maybe they're an under-resourced school, or it may be because they're a really fancy private school that says our regular classes are better than AP classes. There are a lot of those that say we don't offer APs because our classes are actually harder than an AP class. And when admissions officers are trying to compare students from all different kinds of schools and all different kinds of districts, they want as much as possible to try to put people on an even playing field, right? So they're going to recalculate the GPA. They are going to consider the rigor of the courses. So they look at the transcript to see, is the student really pushing themselves to take classes that are challenging but appropriate for them, or are they getting the easy A? And that's why they have a 4.0 GPA. They're also going to look at something called a school profile, which really lays out how the school calculates GPAs, the typical progression of courses for students, how the school differentiates honors from college placement, from advanced, from all the different options that may be there. So it's almost like the school is providing the college a list of definitions so that they can understand how to interpret a student's transcript, right? So all of this information will come into play, but colleges want to just see it separate. So that's why we use unweighted. Great.
Yeah.
Did that answer the question?
Sheila, I would just add to that too. In Massachusetts and New England, a lot of the colleges will recalculate. And when you go on admission tours, I think students and families could ask how they recalculate. What is their formula? Because each school is different. And I know there are schools in Massachusetts, even state schools, that do recalculate, but they all have their own specific formula that they use.
Right, right. And a lot of the times that's on the website for the school too, how they would recalculate your GPA.
And just to add that everything you said is on our school profile. And for all the parents and the students, our profile is on our website, and it breaks down what the grading scale is, and it actually lists the honors and AP classes. So college admissions reps, as you said, if we don't offer a certain AP or honors class, they'll see that on that list.
Great. That was a great question. Got another question. Is early action or early decision a good strategy? You'll find that whenever you ask me a question, I'm going to start with it depends. It really depends on your student's situation and how ready they are to commit to a college, how ready they are with their application materials. To start with some definitions, early action is an application round where students will submit their application usually by November 1st or 15th. And they do not have to promise the college that they will attend if they were accepted. Early action is just like, I'm going to submit it early, and they're going to tell you early, but it doesn't mean you're locked in, right? Usually they'll give you the decisions back by the second week of December. And so those students, you know, can relax and enjoy their Christmas break, and they don't have to worry about filing applications over winter break. Early decision is similar in terms of the deadline, usually November 1st or November 15th, but it is binding. So there is an agreement that parent, student, and counselor will have to sign, acknowledging that this is a binding kind of agreement. And if you get in, you are committed to going to that school. So you're limited from, you know, applying to other schools, right? There are ways to get out of an early decision bind, but it usually has to do with not having enough financial aid or someone taking like threatening legal action. You don't really want to go there, right? So early decision is only for students who really know this is absolutely the school they want to go to. No hesitation, they would go there in a heartbeat if they're accepted, right? In order to be competitive in the early rounds, because these are sort of self-selecting, students were really on top of stuff. They've got their college list done by June. They've worked all summer on their college applications. All of their recommendations were asked for at the end of junior year. You know, they've got great test scores already in place. They got all their ducks in a row by November 1st, which is, you know, a feat. So these tend to be strong students if they're that disciplined to get everything done that early. So it is a competitive pool, but historically, the admissions rates for early action or early decision are much higher than regular decision, which is at the end of December or the beginning of January, right? Sometimes it has to do with the fact that colleges feel you're making kind of a demonstration of your real interest. Certainly with early decision you are, early action, maybe you're actually interested, or maybe this is just a backup plan for you. But schools want to admit students that actually want to go to those colleges. So if you are applying early, that's an indication you're really interested. So you might get a little bit of a bump in the admissions process there. But the other reason that the admissions rate for early action and early decision are higher has to do with recruited athletes who are being guaranteed a spot on a team. Most of them do apply early. Or it might have to do with legacy students, you know, children of alumni or children of donors. The kind of special cases usually end up going in early action. And colleges are increasingly filling their classes with more and more early applicants than regular decision applicants. So in most cases, you know, if a student has everything together and they're fairly sure about a college, I will encourage certainly some early action applications, maybe early decision depending on, you know, how they feel about a school. But the majority of students will still apply in the regular round. Over the last couple of years, colleges have started adding an early decision or early action 2, which happens at the end of December, but you get the answers back like in late January, early February, instead of having to wait to the end of March. That also can be a boost in the application process for students too. So this is really a piece of strategy you've got to think carefully about. There are some schools also that will restrict you. So if you're applying to really any of the Ivy Leagues, you know, Harvard has something they call single choice early action, where you can apply early action and it's not binding, but you are not allowed to apply to any other private college early, right? You can apply to public colleges, but not private colleges early. So it's kind of like a puzzle you got to figure out. I hope that answers that question.
I see a hand up too.
Yeah, let's go to the raised hand.
Wow. That's Sarah Oakes. Go ahead, Sarah.
Hi, Sarah.
Hi, Sheila. Thank you very much. My question is, could you speak a little bit about demonstrated interest in the time of COVID? Yeah. Because there's some schools that we've wanted to go to with my son who's a junior, and it just hasn't been, we haven't been allowed to, and it's an awful long way to go to just drive around and not have an interview. So. Right.
Yeah, absolutely. So demonstrated interest is basically a student showing a school through a number of different kinds of behaviors and actions that they are very interested. And we've seen over the last, let's say 10 years, that demonstrated interest has been an actual real impactful factor in whether a student gets in or not. Because as I was saying, colleges want to accept students who want to go to them. They don't want to waste a spot on you by accepting you and you're actually not even interested. And this is for a whole host of other reasons. They're trying to manage their yield. That makes them go up in the rankings if they have a high yield, right? So demonstrating your interest could be having a conversation with an admissions rep who comes to your school. It could be following them on Twitter, Facebook, TikTok, YouTube, you know, all of the socials. It could be emailing or calling in to the admissions office with a question that cannot be answered by looking on the internet. It could be doing an in-person tour. It could be doing a virtual tour. It could be attending a student panel. It could be, you know, any of these other things that you could do to really show, I want to get to know this school because it is really in the running for, you know, one of the schools I will apply to. So it's hard to say whether doing an in-person visit carries more weight than, you know, asking a question that can't be answered on the internet. But I think whatever actually is authentic is important, right? You know, if you're really interested in a school, by all means, you're going to want to go to their website a number of times, and you're going to want to, you know, ask your questions and do a virtual tour and all of these things. So that will happen. And they do track whether you open the emails that they send you. So open them. They use the same software that, you know, Target and Amazon use to show you ads. You know, they track your behavior online to see if you're really interested in them or not, because it's that valuable to them to find the students who are very interested. So I wouldn't say all hope is lost if you can't go visit, but, you know, maybe one of the things you could do is, and try to have your son do this, call the admissions office and say, hey, I would love to come for a tour. I know you're not open or whatever, but could you introduce me to a student that I could ask some more questions of? Or, you know, a lot of colleges are actually setting students up with personal tour guides where it's happening over FaceTime, and your student will FaceTime with a student and that student will take them around campus, right? So not the same, but it's better than nothing. So there are a lot of different ways to demonstrate interest like that.
Thank you very much. That was really helpful.
You're welcome. Yeah, you're welcome.
I think we have one more question in the chat, if you don't mind doing that one.
Yeah, sure.
How's the process different for a recruited athlete?
Yeah, it's a really great question. So the process can be very different depending on what kind of sport you play and whether you're a boy or girl. And so the timeline is different for both. Typically, students start thinking about going this path of becoming a recruited athlete in college somewhere around the end of their sophomore year. That's when coaches from various colleges can legally start approaching students about, you know, do you want to play on our team, or let's see how you do, come to this camp or whatever. So there's a lot of reaching out to coaches, making sure they know you're interested. Maybe depending on the sport, maybe you're putting together a highlight reel, a video that you're sending off to coaches. For some of those students, particularly field hockey for girls. It just starts so early. I have a lot of female field hockey players who are prepping for the ACT before the end, or the SAT before the end of their sophomore year, because these coaches want to have an idea of their test scores, right? So if that's the route you're going, you might need to test early, though the NCAA, which manages athletics at the college level, has waived the testing requirements last year and this year because of COVID. Some students are just not able to take tests. But you'll really want to understand your competitiveness as an athlete and what that will do for you at a given school, right? Some schools are Division I, very competitive, and you have to be really good, and then also very academically talented at the same time to be considered there. But it is a process that involves, I would say, like a lot more networking than your typical college application process. Your application is not going to be any different. And in most cases, you will still be held to the same academic standards as any other student who is applying to that university. But your your athletic talent can be seen as a bonus on your application. In a similar way, actually, just was talking to a student about this, musical talent can be seen in that way. If the orchestra is losing all of its bassoons because they're all graduating next year, well, that orchestra leader needs a bassoon. And if you happen to play bassoon, that may be your way into a school, right? So it's worth kind of understanding the team or the orchestra or the band or whatever it is, and what needs they may have, and how you fit into that as well. So that was sort of a vague answer because it is very different depending on the sport. But if you have a recruited athlete, want to talk to me about their sport and how this process may go, I'm happy to help.
Well, Sheila, thank you so much. That was wonderfully informative and so great to have everyone together here tonight, able to ask their questions. I encourage everyone to go to the link that is in the chat that Sheila had shared with us. And if you're welcome to also email me at GEF if you have any follow-up questions, or if you want that link and you can't find it. We also are recording this, and so we'll be putting it online, and I encourage you to share that with friends or other families who might need the information or benefit from it. I think a lot of people would. Thank you so much.
No problem. Thank you for having me.
All right. Take care, everyone.
All right. Bye.